From driving an amphibious car into a lagoon, to secretly riding a mechanical horse in the White House bedroom, to boxing so hard as president, he literally went blind. This is every president's favorite hobby. And some of them are so bizarre, you'll be wondering how they kept this hidden from the public. Like George Washington, who had a serious passion for crossbreeding donkeys. But this wasn't some random farm experiment. He was on a mission to create a super animal. Sir, he's freaking jacked. 'Cause even though Washington was known as the father of the American mule, he desired something even bigger. And that's when the King of Spain gifted him a rare Spanish jack, the largest donkey to ever step foot in America. You happy, sir? Meanwhile, John Adams' favorite hobby was a little more relatable, reading and walking. 'Cause when Adams wasn't stuffing his brain with knowledge, he was leisurely enjoying a 5-mile walk. Imagine how pumped he'd be for audiobooks. On the other hand, this next president was busy fossil collecting. 'Cause Thomas Jefferson was obsessed with the skeletons of mastodons, giant prehistoric mammoths that once roamed North America. Whoa! But he didn't just find them fascinating. Jefferson viewed them as a unique characteristic of America that we should be proud of. So, as president, he instructed Lewis and Clark to search for fossils along their expedition. And in Kentucky, they unearthed over 300 bones, many of which are showcased in Jefferson's Monticello estate today. Sir, the mammoth finger is the size of my head. But after collecting ancient fossils, Jefferson pulled up a chessboard with James Madison. 'Cause Madison's favorite hobby was chess. And my dude didn't just dabble. He played epic 4-hour matches against his close friend Thomas Jefferson. It was the perfect way for the two intellectual powerhouses to duke it out. Checkmate. Oh, sorry, sir. You'll get him next time. But let's grab some fresh air with this next president. 'Cause James Monroe's favorite hobby was horseback riding. Dating back to the Revolutionary War, Monroe was an exceptional rider. And even as he got older, he'd saddle up and ride down the road to visit his neighbor, Thomas Jefferson. The two loved horseback riding and casually talking politics. I'm starting to think everyone's favorite hobby was just hanging out with my boy TJ. But I think Jefferson wanted to give this next president some alone time. 'Cause John Quincy Adams' favorite hobby was skinny dipping. Every morning at 5 a.m., Adams would walk 2 miles, strip down, and jump straight into the Potomac River. Cannonball! But this wasn't just for frills. He was basically biohacking before biohacking was cool. 'Cause Adams noticed that the cold water woke up his body and calmed his nerves. Which is good, because one time, a female journalist sat on his clothes and refused to leave until he gave her an interview. And I definitely would have escorted her off the premises, but she kinda had my clothes too. Sorry, sir. Anyway, Andrew Jackson's favorite obsession was horse racing. He was an owner, breeder, and trainer. And during his presidency, Old Hickory built a racing stable on the White House grounds where he pushed horses to their breaking point. As a matter of fact, he once took Vice President Van Buren to the race course when a horse lost control and nearly ran over Van Buren. But Jackson didn't panic. He just shouted at Van Buren to get out of the way. You don't want to get between that man and his horse. Kinda like you don't want to get between Martin Van Buren and a glass of whiskey. 'Cause drinking wasn't just a hobby for my MVP. It was practically woven into his DNA. He grew up in his father's tavern, and by the time he was 25, he could drink high-proof whiskey for hours without showing a single sign of intoxication. Sir, I love you. I love you, man. I don't care who knows it. But while I recover from this hangover, you enjoy a book with this next president. 'Cause William Henry Harrison loved reading about the Roman Empire, especially Plutarch. Funny enough, his original inauguration speech had so many Roman references that his editor joked he had to kill 17 Roman officials just to make it readable. And even then, it was still the longest inauguration speech in US history. Meanwhile, John Tyler's favorite hobby was playing the violin. 'Cause he started at age 7 and became so talented that he nearly became a professional. And even after leaving the White House, the music didn't stop. 'Cause Tyler and his second wife formed a retirement band where he played violin, she played guitar and sang, and I would hop on the tambourine. Just kidding, sir. But while the Tylers jammed out every night, James Polk's favorite hobby was nothing. No, seriously, it was nothing. Polk was so obsessed with work that he actually looked down on hobbies. He once said that no president who performs his duties faithfully and conscientiously can have any leisure. Talk about a buzzkill, am I right? I said, what strong will you have, sir? But at least Zachary Taylor knew how to slow down, 'cause his favorite pastime was watching his beloved horse, Old Whitey, graze on the White House lawn. The two went way back to the Mexican-American War, where Taylor famously rode Whitey as cannonballs flew so close they passed between the horse's legs. So when Taylor became president, of course he was proud to see his old buddy enjoying retirement. People, let me tell you about my best friend. But speaking of best buds, Millard Fillmore's was a good book. And he didn't just enjoy reading them, he loved organizing them. After growing up in poverty with zero access to books, Fillmore went on to establish the first official White House library. But while Fillmore had his nose in a book, Franklin Pierce had his in the bottom of a bottle, 'cause his favorite hobby was drinking. And sadly, it was to numb the pain of personal life. 'Cause after tragically losing all three of his sons, Pierce spiraled into a dark depression and leaned on drinking as a crutch. Not exactly the best presidential hobby I've ever heard. But speaking of late-night drinks, James Buchanan lived for the dinner party. Despite never marrying, Buchanan loved eating, drinking, and gossiping the night away. Sir, there's a civil war brewing outside. Can we just cut the party short for once? But unlike Buchanan, Abraham Lincoln's favorite hobby was reading and storytelling. 'Cause even though he grew up poor, Lincoln became a voracious reader, carrying Shakespeare everywhere he went. And that love of books must have made him a master storyteller, 'cause Lincoln often used humor to cope with the immense pressure of the Civil War. For example, during one debate, his opponent Stephen Douglas called him two-faced. So Lincoln turned to the crowd and said, "I leave it to my audience. If I had another face, do you think I would wear this one?" Okay, that was actually hilarious. On the other hand, Andrew Johnson preferred something a little more hands-on, 'cause his favorite hobby was tailoring suits. After growing up as a tailor's apprentice, Johnson never dropped the craft, and it made him arguably the best-dressed president of the 19th century. "Sir, I've got a hole right here. Can you just stitch me up real fast?" But while Johnson helps your boy out, enjoy some horses with Ulysses S. Grant. 'Cause from a young age, Grant was basically a horse whisperer. When a circus came to town and dared anyone to ride a wild pony, 11-year-old Grant volunteered, hopped on the horse, and held on tight while it bucked like crazy. "You got this, sir!" And when the horse finally surrendered, Grant took a victory lap around the ring. But he didn't stop there. 'Cause when Grant attended West Point, he set the high jump record on horseback, a record that stood for more than 25 years. And as president, Grant was pulled over for speeding his carriage through the streets of D.C. The officer said, "I'm very sorry, Mr. President, but duty is duty. I'll have to place you under arrest." So yeah, Grant loved horses so much, they literally got him arrested. But let's move on to a less controversial hobby, like Rutherford B. Hayes and his Siamese cat. 'Cause Hayes was once gifted an extremely rare Siamese cat from Thailand. And when she arrived at the White House, Siam became an instant celebrity, famous for her striking looks and dramatic entrances. Hayes even let her interrupt state dinners and completely steal the spotlight. Kinda like what happens when Mrs. Flappy visits me at work. Right, babe? But speaking of state dinners, James Garfield had a different party trick to entertain guests. He'd sit down with a pen in each hand and ask his friends to pose a question. And when they did, he wrote the answer in Greek with one hand and Latin with the other at the same time. Sir, I can't even rub my tummy and pat my head at the same time. Meanwhile, Chester A. Arthur preferred to escape Washington, D.C. altogether. 'Cause even though he enjoyed window shopping for fancy clothes, Arthur also liked disappearing into nature with a rod in hand. He was an avid fisherman who often took fishing trips to Yellowstone. Kinda like Grover Cleveland, who relied on fishing and duck hunting as an emotional reset, 'cause it offered Cleveland something pretty rare in politics: silence. Sorry, sir, but Cleveland wasn't the only president who had a passion for duck hunting, 'cause Benjamin Harrison was an expert marksman who frequently went on secret waterfowling trips around the Potomac River. You got it, sir, you got it. Meanwhile, William McKinley preferred spending his free time with his wife, 'cause every night after dinner, he and his wife Ida would pull out a deck of cards and play a game called euchre. And oh boy, did Ida hate losing. So, to avoid any spicy arguments before bed, McKinley would intentionally lose the game. Smart move, sir. That's a man who understands diplomacy. But unlike McKinley, Teddy Roosevelt's favorite hobby was a little more intense. 'Cause as a sickly asthmatic child, Teddy's father threw him into boxing to build up his body. And it literally transformed Teddy into the rugged, manly man we know today. Now, he wasn't a naturally gifted boxer, but he was tenacious. At Harvard, he competed as a lightweight, and as president, he sparred military aides in the White House basement. But it all came to a violent end in 1908, when Teddy took a left hook to the eye that detached his retina, leaving him permanently blind in that eye. But in classic Teddy fashion, he didn't retire from martial arts. He just switched to jiu-jitsu. Sir, I can't breathe. On the other hand, William Taft was the first golfer-in-chief. 'Cause even though golf was considered a rich man's game at the time, Taft helped popularize it among Americans, proving that even 300-pound men can swing with the best of them. 4! But this next president took his golf obsession to a whole new level, 'cause Woodrow Wilson played over 1,000 rounds during his presidency. That's roughly 1 round every other day. And the commitment went even further, 'cause Wilson famously golfed during a snowstorm, ordering his Secret Service agents to paint the balls red so he could see them in the snow. Here you go, sir. But this next president's favorite hobby wasn't just controversial, it was basically illegal, 'cause Warren G. Harding loved playing poker. He hosted weekly poker nights at the White House with his inner circle of cronies, known as the Ohio Gang. And despite alcohol being banned during Prohibition, the group smoked, drank, and gambled the night away. In fact, Harding's poker habit got so out of control, he once gambled away a set of White House china. Sir, that's expensive! But if you thought poker nights were crazy, Calvin Coolidge's favorite hobby might be the strangest of them all, 'cause he secretly rode a mechanical horse in his bedroom. So why a fake horse? Well, as a child, Coolidge developed allergies to real horses, and as president, he put on a few extra pounds, so his doctor ordered more exercise. Bring in the exercise horse! An electric mechanical horse invented by John Harvey Kellogg, the same dude who made cornflakes. And Silent Cow rode that thing 3 times a day. Yeehaw! But just like Coolidge, Herbert Hoover needed to exercise during his presidency. So the White House doctor invented a sport for him to play, Hoover ball. It's when you throw a heavy medicine ball over a volleyball net and the other team tries to catch it. If they drop it, then you get a point. And Hoover loved it so much, he played every day at 7 a.m. on the White House lawn. I got this one, sir! I got it! I got it! Meanwhile, Franklin Roosevelt's favorite hobby was a little less physical, 'cause he enjoyed stamp collecting. Starting at just 8 years old, FDR collected over 1.2 million stamps in his lifetime. It was his way of winding down from the stress of the day. And Harry Truman's favorite hobby was just as wholesome, 'cause after taking piano lessons as a child, Truman played the keys all the way to the White House. As vice president, he gained instant fame when actress Lauren Bacall posed playfully atop his piano. Nice job swooning the ladies, sir. But let's head back outside with Dwight Eisenhower, whose favorite hobby was golf. And he loved it so much, he installed a putting green right on the White House grounds. However, he ran into a little problem: squirrels. 'Cause they treated the green like a nut storage facility, digging holes and tearing up the south lawn. So Eisenhower told a Secret Service agent, "The next time you see one of those squirrels go near my putting green, take a gun and shoot it." Say no more, sir. Hey! Don't worry, sir. I'm on it. Anyways, let's enjoy a nice breeze with John F. Kennedy, because his favorite hobby was sailing, an activity that perfectly matched his image. Cool, calm, and effortlessly New England. Growing up in Massachusetts, JFK sailed competitively on his boat, Victoria, and as he got older, the boats just got bigger, including lavish yachts like Honey Fitz. But as president, he took things to another level, cruising aboard the floating White House, a presidential yacht equipped with cutting-edge Cold War communications. For JFK, being on the water wasn't just a hobby, it was freedom. Kinda like Lyndon Johnson, except LBJ hit the water with his amphibious car. Yeah, you heard that right. I'm talking about his rare 1962 Amphicar that could drive on land and float on water. Cause whenever people visited his Texas ranch, LBJ would prank them by driving his convertible downhill toward a lagoon, yelling, "The brakes are out, we're going in!" Whew, good one, sir. You really had me there. Anyone got an extra pair of pants? Meanwhile, Richard Nixon definitely had an extra bowling ball. Cause he loved bowling so much, he had a secret bowling alley installed beneath the White House. It's where he could escape the noise of politics and bowl a high score of 232. Not bad, sir. But speaking of escape, Gerald Ford was a ski bum who escaped to Vail, Colorado every Christmas. And oh boy, was he an aggressive skier. In fact, the Secret Service had to learn to ski to keep up with him on the slopes. Sir, wait up! At least Jimmy Carter's favorite hobby was a little easier, cause he preferred fly fishing. But it wasn't about trophies or big catches. It was about stillness, reflection, and time alone with his thoughts. Hey, where'd my line go? Oops, sorry, sir. But like some of our early presidents, Ronald Reagan's favorite hobby was horseback riding. Cause long before the White House, Reagan was a rancher who spent hours riding trails, fixing fences, and caring for his horses. And on the ranch, there was one strict rule: no politics. It was Reagan's way of reconnecting with his roots and leaving the chaos of Washington at the gate. Which is why I'm stuck all the way out here. But at least George H.W. Bush let me join in on his hobby, because his passion for skydiving was actually rooted with fear. During World War II, Bush was a 20-year-old Navy pilot shot down over the Pacific and forced to parachute into the ocean. This is actual footage of Bush getting rescued. It was traumatic. But even still, Bush vowed to one day skydive again. And that day came at 72 years old when he performed a solo skydive in Arizona. And he didn't stop there. Bush jumped again at 75, 80, 85, and even 90 years old. Sir, this is incredible! But back on the ground, Bill Clinton enjoyed playing the saxophone. And it might have actually gotten him elected to the top job. Cause in 1992, Clinton was trailing in polls and struggling to connect with younger voters. So he appeared on the Arsenio Hall show and played the sax. And man, was this a breakout moment. Cause Clinton's rendition of Heartbreak Hotel had him grooving all the way to the White House. But it wasn't until George W. Bush left the White House that we discovered his true passion: painting. The only problem? The world didn't find out until a hacker leaked private family photos that included 2 self-portraits of Bush in the shower and bathtub. Sir, what the heck are you painting? Okay, let's move on to this next president before things get any weirder. Cause at least Barack Obama's favorite hobby was basketball. A lifelong love that led to him converting the White House tennis court into a basketball court. And on the floor, Barack was nicknamed Barry Obama. Barry with another 3-bomb. But while Obama drained buckets, Donald Trump hit the links. Cause this president loves golf courses so much, he owns 17 worldwide. And he's a pretty good player too. Well, it kinda depends on who you ask. Cause pros like Tiger Woods and Bryson DeChambeau have complimented his swing, whereas some critics claim that Trump embellishes his scorecard. Either way, Trump sees golf as more than just a game. Cause in The Art of the Deal, he wrote that the relaxed environment of a golf course makes people more open to negotiation. Hey, maybe we can renegotiate my salary, sir? Oh, never mind. In contrast, Joe Biden's favorite hobby is collecting classic cars, especially American muscle cars from the 50s and 60s. But the crown jewel of his garage is his 1967 Chevrolet Corvette Stingray convertible. It was a gift given by his father, and this baby pushes 350 horses and can go 0 to 60 in under 6 seconds. All right, sir, let it rip! Woohoo! But speaking of presidents at full throttle, this is every level of presidential transport. From pulling up to inauguration on horseback